All right. So, Russell, why don't you set up this next segment here? Talk a little bit about Riley Gaines. Who is she, and what are we about to watch?
Okay, so I'm gonna rather than to save this for the end of this segment, I'm gonna say this now. Whenever we've discussed this subject, a lot of people.
Just in case anybody doesn't know who she is, introduce what the subject is, because some people are going into this totally blind.
Oh, yeah. Okay. All right. Yeah, that hadn't occurred to me. Yeah. All right. So
I thought Riley Gaines, I thought Trump paid her hush money. That sounds like the name that Trump would pay hush money to. I didn't even know who the hell this was until a few days ago.
Okay. So Riley Gaines was a competitive college swimmer who swam against Leah Thomas. Now, she wound up tying him for 5th in a swim competition.
We're tying her. But, let's leave. Yeah, we'll go 15. Let's see if we can make it 15 seconds before the
before they come through. Okay, she was like, I'm talking about Riley Gaines now. She was really horrified that they just put somebody with male body parts into the women's locker room without telling them. There was no warning. They were not told that this was going to happen. All of a sudden, there's this, over 6 foot person with a penis walking around in the locker room. This was somebody, we're going to save this and I'll explain why. We'll get into this more on Thursday.
Yes, but for a very good reason, which we'll announce at the end of this. Yeah,
we will announce why. This was somebody who had been ranked 462nd as a male swimmer, who went on to win the women's swimming championship. So, according to Riley Gaines, and I'm sure this is true, the majority of the women athletes that she has spoken to are horrified by this turn of events, but they're also afraid to speak out because of the social climate. Gaines spoke out about it, saying this is not fair to women athletes. It's a violation of Title IX. We're supposed to have equal opportunities. We're losing scholarships because of this. Clearly, there is a difference between men and women. It is not fair to expect women to have to compete against trans women in this way, because if you did go through male puberty, you are going to have physical differences. So she, she was going to go live a very conventional life. She was engaged. She was going to go to dental school, and she gained so much notoriety. I get the sense unwelcome, but it was one of those things. Once she opened her mouth, that's it. She's kind of committed herself to life as an activist. So she got viciously attacked and essentially held hostage this week in a speech that she gave. Now, first, I want to look at a speech that she gave at University of Pittsburgh last week, because I think this is part of what set off this attack on her, because she made an anthropologist who challenged her look like a fool, and the entire room cracked up. And she did that by going at a core premise that no reasonable person could buy. And they can't afford to have this conversation openly because they're not standing on solid ground. So let's take a look at that one first.
At which they are. The advantages that Michael Phelps has.
Hang on.
Which makes.
Hang on. Okay, so to explain this, because I didn't want to show the whole question. All right, so the anthropologist said, well, Michael Phelps has certain physical advantages, so should Michael Phelps not be allowed to swim? So this is her response to that.
Okay. At the level at which they are. The advantages that Michael Phelps has, I believe he has Marfan syndrome, which makes he's more elastic in his joints. He has typically longer limbs. His fingers are longer. His feet are bigger. All of those things, that would create nowhere near a 10 to 12% performance gap between him and his competitors. nowhere near that same percentage. And so that's kind of to answer that question. To compare man and woman to Michael Phelps to the next best competitor is not equivalent by any means. Your next question, I kind of forget, but I actually have a question for you. You being an anthropologist, which anthropology is the study of human civilization, human biological and social. So if you were to dig up a human, two humans, and 100 years from now, both man and woman, could you tell the difference? Strictly off of bones.
No, because there's a wide range of...
So he says no.
This is what got her attack.
Women have...
I'm not sure why I'm being laughed at if I'm the expert in the room. Have any of you been to archaeological sites? Have any of you studied biological anthropology? I'm just saying. I've got over 150 years of data. I'm just curious as to why I'm being laughed at when
I believe it or not, I have put a lot of research into this because I'm not comparing myself to you. I'm not comparing myself to you. I'm just telling you that I have considered all viewpoints.
His assertion that you can't tell that from bones is literally religion. That's not science to assert something like that.
Yeah, it's like that. I mean, that's the first thing you know is there's bone differences.
Of course.
I mean, it's the first thing. I mean,
so for him to
kidding?
assert that, now we're talking about a religion. And what does he do to this? Is part of why our elites, why academia is losing credibility, because what does he do to try to defend his position? Does he give you a scientific reason why you can't tell men from women from bones in spite of all available evidence? No, he says, I have a PhD. I'm an expert. Why? I don't know why I'm being laughed at. I'm the expert. I have the data. Okay. And then you got a couple of idiots on the other side of the room when he says, I have a PhD, who just like the Bill Maher audience with David Throne.
Right.
They clap for him having a PhD. Now, I wanted to take a look at this for one thing, because this tells you who Riley Gaines is and what she's doing. I also believe because she doesn't get the kind of visibility that some other people who speak out in this area get. So she doesn't get a lot of focus from trans activists. But that clip went viral and got a lot of coverage. And that gets to the heart of this. That gets to the heart of this, that you're not talking about social activism at this point. You're talking about Scientology. You're talking about religion. You're talking about something that is no longer grounded in reality, that people are being forced to either go along with or be silent. And when I hear people say, well, but look at all of these scientists who agree. Okay, to me, you sound like somebody in the middle of the Inquisition saying, but everyone agrees that Catholic theology is superior. Well, what happens if you say it isn't?
Right.
What happened to her?
Well, especially in an academic setting, especially where she was, especially in that forum.
Right. Look, these people, they're worried for their careers. They live on grants, and you can't get a grant to do proper research in this area in this country anymore. You can in other countries. And again, we'll get into a lot of this on Thursday because I will reveal it now. We have very often had people say when we get into these topics, why don't you invite trans people on the show?
We are, however, inviting a very high-profile trans advocate onto the show on Thursday. He has already accepted our invitation. His name is Buck Angel. He was actually a trans porn star back in the day. And now he is an educator. He has his own YouTube show. You can look him up. Buck Angel. He represents what Russell claims is a very substantial, like I said, I don't know this issue as much as he does, a very substantial portion of the trans community who is at odds with the more militant factions of the trans activist movement, precisely because they feel like what they're doing is actually setting trans rights back, not moving it forward. And so Buck is one of those people. I've watched some of his content over the last few days. Seems like a wonderful guy. We've had a great email exchange so far. He actually just emailed me back 3 minutes ago, actually, confirming for Thursday. And so we are very, very excited to have him on. And it'll be a great talk. You know, we've had conversations about covering this topic in the past, and I have told Russell, I said, I think we should hold up. Russell has wanted to do a deep dive into these issues for a long time, and every time I've stalled him, and I've stalled him because I think that if you're going to tackle it for real, we should do it for real. And that includes bringing a trans person on to talk about these things, which is what we are doing on Thursday. We're very, very excited for that show. That's going to be at 8 o'clock. That's going to be the whole program. It's going to be a real deep dive, a little bit of a different episode. No, you know, headlines or comedy sketches. That'll be the whole show. And we're really looking forward to that. And we hope everybody can tune in. All right.
And this is what I most want to communicate. And this is part of why I want to talk to this guest. I think a lot of people who might, you know, and we have some people like, I don't want to call you out, but I don't think you mind. We're all family here. God bless you, Gene. We've had disagreements on this issue in the past, and you've stayed on the show. I really respect that kind of open-mindedness to stay here. We probably agree on more than we disagree about, but I know you've disagreed with some things that I've said. But I think a lot of people think that the choices in this subject are between A and between B. Now, it is very clear, I think, to the people who watch our show that in politics, when you're manipulated into believing that, there's probably a lot of information that's being kept from you and you're being funneled into supporting one side or another side, right? So I'm suggesting use the open mind that led you away from the two-party system to think maybe A and B are both wrong. Maybe there's a C here. And maybe as a left movement, we should be giving refuge to all of the trans people who are being attacked by people who are largely not even trans in this movement for speaking out and having a difference of opinion that they do not feel confident enough in their point of view to debate. They only want to attack and shut it down the way that a fanatical religious group would. And we as a left movement, my sympathies align with the people who are being silenced from that community, not the people who are pretending to represent it. All right, that is my point. It's not an anti-trans position to support trans people who are being attacked by a fanatical movement.
Right, and that's what Buck has said. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so anyway, now that we got that out of the way, let's keep going here. So now we'll see the aftermath of a recent event at the University of San Francisco State, right? And so here is the aftermath of that, where this ambush happens. We're going to see this from two angles. One is from Riley Gaines' own phone, which she posted to her own social media, and then we will cut to a different angle where we can see her herself.
Yeah, you fucking trans fucking bitch. I fucking see you. Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights.
Does it seem like a social justice movement to you? Or does it seem like a fanatical club?
Trans rights are human rights. Trans rights are human rights.
All right, so this is from her phone. And you can see that very, very clearly here with the angle switch that I will show you. So there's the cameras pointed at her, and then here's those same cameras pointed at her from this side. All right, now when it comes to this stuff here where Russell was talking about try to use the same state of mind that led you out of duopoly politics, that'll leave you out of seeing things in such a binary way.
That's it.
I would just like to posit this, okay? Just a little callback to earlier in the show, right? The reason a lot of you guys in the chat who are now calling us things for no reason whatsoever, which you can never back up and never will, you know, you never will be able to back them up. So it's no real bother to me. These college kids are doing this. They're being encouraged to do this because the establishment does not want them to do this. Right?
Yes.
The kids doing that in the hallway are never going to do this.
That's the big picture.
And that's the big picture. Okay?
Yes.
So just so we get that out of the way. Right? You guys think you're being very original. I assure you, you're not.
They're encouraging a culture war to avoid a class war.
Exactly. All right, so here they are. We get the picture here. All right, now while she was in the room, here we have them talking about making her pay to come out and breaking her pride here.
We're hoping to do is to keep things peaceful and
make her lose her pride
and move.
Make her lose her pride.
Tell her to pay us. Tell her to pay us, and then she could go. $10 each.
Make her pay us. That's kidnapping.
I got paid for this shit, so we could get paid for it too.
On a public campus that we attend.
So what's the end goal here? We're cooperating, so what's next?
So,
We can get out.
So they need to do their job and get her out here. We created a path. It's here.
All right, cool. All right, so Riley explained what happened the following day. Do we want to play that? That's about 2 minutes. Should we play that? Me as well, right, Russell?
Let's take a look.
All right, let's take a look.
And from both directions of the hallway. And so because there was no clear exit out of this hallway, we were kind of forced into a side room, another classroom, office room, where we essentially had to lock ourselves in for 3 hours. 3 hours of which there was chanting and screaming and yelling, vulgar and violent things, just really awful things that both myself and the officers. And we sat there for 3 hours, barricaded in the room. And even after the 3 hours, when we finally got to leave, these protesters were still stood right there, screaming the entire time.
What were they screaming at you, Riley?
They were screaming, of course, trans women are women. They were screaming that there will be vengeance and that this is a fight and that I'm using my white privilege and all of these. There were threats, there were intimidation, there was. They kept saying, "Open the door, let us at Riley. We want to fight her. Just let us talk to her. Open the door." And so it was kind of a weird feeling because I wasn't necessarily scared.
There you go.
Okay. All right. So is this really a movement that we, as a left movement, want to attach ourselves to? Do we want to connect ourselves to that? Because I promise you, the backlash is coming. And when it comes, it is going to be very severe. And people who advocated for this are they're going to be spending a lot of time deleting their old posts and their old tweets. And if we connect ourselves as a left movement to that, we're going to get caught up in it.
Take the mic 1 second. I got to let my cat out of here. He's being an asshole.
We have got to make it clear that we do support trans people, that we do support trans rights, but we are not these people and not this way. And we understand that there are unique issues regarding biological realities that need to be addressed, that these things need to be discussed. What do we do about athletics? It is not fair to have trans men or trans women competing in women's sports. It's not fair, but it's also not fair for them not to be able to compete in athletics. So let's have a conversation. Let's talk about what we do about that. It is not fair, and it's actually against international law, to force women in prison to be housed with biological men. At the same time, there are unique dangers for trans people in prison. What do we do about that? Let's have a conversation. But trying to deal with this by denying reality and pretending that there is literally no difference between men and women, that is not going to work. In the end, that approach, as many trans people who are being shut down for their opinion try to argue, that approach is creating such a backlash against trans people that it's actually hurting the rights that they've gained over decades.
Yeah, and that's what Buck said on a recent debate that I just watched, because we've been prepping for this interview on Thursday. He said something to the effect, this is not an exact quote, but I will find it so I can ask him about this. He says, when you challenge reality in such a full frontal way, the world hits back at you.
Yes.
And that actually hurts the cause of trans rights. He's someone who's been a trans person now for 30 years, over 30 years, right? So this is a person with experience, right? This is not someone who can be so easily dismissed, as some people in the chat I noticed have tried already. And I said, tune in Thursday. That's all I have to say. That's all I have to say. I don't have anything to say. People make accusations. All you can do is make an accusation. I've never had anybody explain any of these accusations towards either myself nor Russell, because there is no explanation.
Yeah, somebody back there said they should have they should have hit her harder. They should have hit her harder. Like,
now, who's the fascist?
You're a sick fuck. Right. You're a sick fuck. You don't even belong. What are you doing here? What are you doing?
Who's the fascist in this situation? Is what I would like to know. I would like to know who is the fascist in this situation. They should have hit her harder. Exactly. I mean, what kind of a sicko do you have to be
for expressing an opinion, right? For engaging in a conversation and a debate? If you are so confident that your viewpoint can withstand scrutiny, debate. That's how we do things. The reason this movement has become so fanatical is, for one thing, and this is something we really need to delve into and figure out. It is absurd on the face of it that at this moment in history, our society is so consumed by such a fringe issue. That's not an accident. We really need to ask who's pushing this and why. Who is behind this and why? Look, right? We're fighting each other over
virtue
something
signaling about trans rights, which is all it is a virtue signal. The reason they're at college is because they want money. That's why you go to college. You go to college because you want to make money. That's why they're there. They're not there to be great people or virtuous people. Issues like this give them an issue to virtue signal about, and therefore assuage their guilt that they are in those halls in the first place to become the beneficiaries of a fundamentally unjust system. That's why they're there. They're not there because they're great people. They're there because they want to get paid. They're there for the same reason anyone does anything in this fucking country, to get paid. And you don't get paid for doing shit like this.
Yep.
Right? You get paid for doing shit like this. That could
cost you something.
That's the difference. Okay? So anyway, we'll talk more about this on Thursday. But in the meantime, it's just completely uncivil. It's just uncivilized. It's anti-democratic. It's anti-human to corner a person in a room and hold her ransom for 3 hours because she said something about sports, about participation in sports. This is not, I'm sorry, sports is not an existential issue. There are existential issues. My cousin is a trans person, and she has a fear of airplanes. She won't get in an airplane and fly. And so when she would drive with her mother from LA to New York, I would ask her, I would say, I didn't ask her in a dickish way, but I said, you're a trans person. You would rather drive through Nebraska than get on an airplane? Seems like driving through Nebraska would be a lot more dangerous, right, for a trans person than getting on an airplane. And she says, yeah, no, it's true. And one of the things that she has to worry about is what public bathroom she uses. This is an issue where, like, I'm not an absolutist on the bathroom issue. It's perhaps a complicated issue, because I think a trans woman who causes a good old boy to do a double take and is liable to freak out and hurt them, yeah, should they have protection? Should they have spaces for their own? Yeah, I think they should. So, like, once again, we're not coming at this, and I don't even feel a need to say this again and again and again because it ought to be obvious. We're not coming at this from an anti-trans point of view. But it is important, I feel like, when we talk about when we do a deeper dive on this issue, I felt it was really important to find one of these trans people that Russell keeps talking about, people who are silenced because they buck the narrative of a contingent of trans activists, right? I think it is important to have that talk, not because we want to hurt trans people, for the exact opposite reason.
And I think a very important point that needs to be made, that a lot of people who are not really thinking through this issue are not considering, reality is going to win in the end. You are not, as he says, when you assault reality like that, you create such a backlash, it hurts their rights. You know who you're empowering by handling it that way? By giving what he said, as soon as I emailed him, he said, I'm glad to be invited on a left platform. I only get invited on right platforms. You're empowering Matt Walsh. You're empowering Ben Shapiro. Because if the only people talking about this are them, you're going to get their perspective on it. And they actually don't believe that trans people have a right to exist. They really don't believe that they have a right to exist. Right. So you are driving all dissenters to have to go to them for lack of any place else to go.
Right, and they don't go to them because they agree. I mean, I don't want to speak for Buck, obviously, but Buck did a debate with Charlie Kirk on these issues, right? So he's not with Charlie Kirk on these issues, but he did say in his email back to us, yes, it's refreshing to be invited on a left show because no left outlets want to touch this in this way, right? They just want to parrot hysteria, which is what this is. This is hysteria. Now, the reason because, you know, Russ and I have spent hours talking about how we're going to tackle this issue. And there are moments where I thought that we had to keep the focus narrow, because if we try to broaden out too quickly and we don't do a thorough job, we're not going to communicate what we need in a clear way, and that's going to backfire. And so I was very conscious of that. I'm also very conscious not to demagogue against trans people as people. Very, very conscious of that. Most people in most communities, or I'm sorry, most people in all communities are just ordinary people trying to do their best, trying to get by, right? So so to me, like, I never want to come across as demagoguing against any of those groups. That's why Muslims had a hard time after 9/11. That's why a lot of immigrants felt very unsafe during the rise of Trump and all that, right? So you never want to do that. You want to have a conversation that actually leaves everyone feeling better. And that's what I hope that the conversation on Thursday will be. In a situation like this, though, this was a situation when this story broke. This is cut and dry. This is simple. This is easy. If you cannot look at this and agree that a college student does not deserve to be chased down a hall and held for ransom for 3 hours for saying it was unfair that she had to compete against a biological male in a swimming contest, if you think she deserves that as punishment, you're just a sick person. You're just a fascist. You're a thug at that point. And so that, like, in a situation like this, a segment like this, I have no hesitation about it whatsoever. This is easy. This is simple. This is simple. This shouldn't even be a discussion. And you got people saying, well, she should have been beaten. I mean, it's just sick. Yeah.
Of course that's sick.
Please clap.